A very good afternoon. It has just gone 1 o'clock on Monday, the 22nd of February, 2021. We are now in the midst of spring election weeks, and welcome to the Hustings today for the Democracy and Development Officer candidates for the position next year. As you can see, this is quite a big year, as is always in the SU calendar, where of course we're working out who will be representing you in your sabbatical officer team next year. Voting opened just an hour ago and closes at 7 o'clock on Friday night. But you're probably wondering at the moment how you can vote, not just for the Democracy and Development Officer candidates that we're going to be seeing very shortly, but indeed all of the other candidates in this election. Well, we have a video from our head of visual here at Raw X1 to explain a little more about this.
Polls are opening soon. This video covers how voting works in SU elections and making your vote count. First, go to the Warwick SU website and log in using your student ID. Hover over the Student Voice tab and select the Elections option. Scroll down to the Spring Elections section, and when polls open, click Vote Now. Voting uses the Single Transferable Vote System, or STV. When voting, you rank your favourite candidate as 1, but also rank the other candidates, so that if your first choice candidate isn't selected, your vote can be transferred to your second, third, and so on. And that's how to vote. Good luck.
Thank you very much there to X1 for explaining the voting process in this year's spring elections. Yes, this is part of Raw 1251 AM's coverage this week as part of our big decision moving towards Friday night when the polls close at 7 o'clock. And we will be hosting hustings with pretty much all of the sabbatical officer positions in this year's spring elections. We had the presidential hustings, which took place last Friday. Johnny Jenkins hosted that. That is available across all of our social medias here on Raw 1251 AM. And across the week, we're going to be talking to candidates for all of the positions and getting to know a little bit more about them and their policies as well. And also at 2 o'clock today, just after this finishes, we'll be releasing all of the interviews that we have conducted with each presidential candidate. A bit of a nice one-on-one to get to know them and their policies a bit more. That will be coming out after this. But let's now, of course, focus on the next 30 to 40 minutes where we're going to be talking now to the Democracy and Development Officer candidates. We have 2 candidates standing in this year's elections. So let's take the opportunity now for them to introduce themselves and explain a bit about their relevant experience and the policies they wish to introduce. So firstly, let's start off with Jacob Jefferson.
Hello, lovely to be here. I felt like that video could have been a bit more enthusiastic about voting. It seemed a bit downtrodden. Maybe that's the environment we're in where there isn't that much excitement. But hopefully these SU elections can bring us some excitement. So I'm Jacob, third year history student, and I'm really excited to stand for Democracy and Development Officer. I think there's a lot of issues, especially related to democracy, which need improvement in the SU. It's just focused around a very small group of students. We need to really try and outreach. And I know that's difficult in a pandemic year, but hopefully by next year we'll be able to do that. And the other reason I'm really standing is because I want campus to be open again. I want to get that student experience back. It's been a really tough year. And as soon as legally as possible, we need to get them all open. And I'm worried that certain people within the SU might try and want to keep it closed for ideological reasons, really, rather than trying to actually support students who just want to have a good time. And also, the SU's had a lot of financial issues. This year, a lot of people on furlough, so we actually need to get those outlets open so they can earn a bit of money. So that's me. And obviously, you can see the link at the bottom there. And please do vote for me when you get around to it.
Jacob, thank you very much for coming on today. I'm going to now introduce Stephen Pym.
Hi, so I'm Stephen. I'm a Centre for Lifelong Learning student, even I can't get it out today. So Westwood campus is obviously a campus for mature students, and I study social studies as well. But I mostly actually studied on main campus in Pace. Now, I have run my own business for nearly 20 years before deciding to go to university. So I started when I was 11 and stopped when I was about 30, 31. And so I've got a lot of business experience to lean back on. So I will be able to reopen things on campus very effectively. And I'm going to focus on other areas that are neglected, so Westwood in particular, and also Gibbet Hill and the other satellite campuses. Make Pim your number one. Right.
Thank you very much to both Jacob and Stephen for both of you for coming on the Hustings today. I'm going to explain to you now a little bit about how this is going to work for the benefits of those watching us right now. We're going to have this Hustings is split into two different sections. We're going to firstly talk about the democracy part of the Democracy and Development Officer role, and then we're going to talk about the development part of the role. I will lead in each section with a question, which I will address to both candidates, and I will alternate this order as we go throughout. One thing to say as well is once I've done the leading question, we'll leave the opportunity for candidates to have some debate and discussion between them. I will only interject to move the debate along and perhaps focus or try to get the candidates to focus on a particular issue that they have brought up. Again, please do get involved throughout. Please comment on this video and ask if you have any other questions for the candidates as well. Please put them there and I will feed them into the debate and the discussion at the relevant moment. So if we are okay to go, let's start off then with the democracy element of the job. And my first question to both candidates is, do you think SU democracy still effectively serves Warwick students' interests? And if not, how will you resolve this? I'm going to come to Stephen first.
So a lot of the issues that have been brought up recently have been about the student union campaigning for online only teaching, whereas I think 75% of students were against that. I think that student union should be a go-between in between students and the university. So not only representing students, but also represent the university back to students. So it's like get compromises and things. I don't think having in-person teaching last year was the right way to go. I think that what the student union could have done things better. So like representing students by saying, look, if we are going to have online only teaching, then we need to have fee reduction in tuition fees. We need to have better sort of things about the rent and not living where you're paying to live. So student union could do better to represent students, but it should also explain its position better to its students. And obviously not all students are 20-somethings. So there's a greater risk for mature students with COVID as well. And that hasn't been communicated to or recognized by other people. Okay, Jacob, if I can put the same question to you now, please.
Yeah, I mean, I would say you're only 30, you're not sort of 70, 80. But yeah, obviously that's actually a good point, which I haven't thought about in terms of the mature student angle. A lot of people complain about the vote we had on online teaching, but I think the fact that it actually went to ASV about the online teaching is a good sign of that SU democracy in action. And we actually have to have more of that. We need to have more things going to ASV rather than just being passed through without any consultation, especially things that haven't been in certain candidates' manifestos. For example, introducing slates into this election, which no one was consulted on. Having society endorsements, no societies were asked if they wanted to do that, and societies clearly do not want to do that. So I actually think we need more things going to ASV, and that's actually the main issue. So even though the online teaching thing was I think silly that they even campaigned for it really, but it was actually a good sign of democracy in action, and we need to have more of that.
The online teaching vote was obviously quite a controversial part of term one and caused a lot of divided opinion amongst students. If I can now perhaps obviously give you the opportunity now to lead off on an open discussion, I just want to ask you this. You both mentioned the importance of all student votes and consulting students there. So I guess in terms of how much you should go to an all student vote or how much you as a DDO have the ability to make decisions on SU democracy, where do you guys sit on this? So I'm going to kind of leave this now to open discussion. So Jacob, I'll start off with you on this.
Where do I sit on allowing more things into ASV? Is that the question?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the balance between going to ASV or
Yeah.
within the remits of officers.
I mean, I think there's those day-to-day decisions which obviously needs to be taken by the Democracy and Development Officer. But I think if it's something which actually affects all students, I think that's the main thing. When you're doing something which actually really affects all students and impacts on all students, and also there's clearly a vested interest in, there's some things which clearly some students won't care that much about, and that's just a common sense thing. You'll be able to know what things students want to engage with and what things they don't. So it's a case-by-case basis, really. It's quite, I think it's quite clear, and if you have good common sense, you should be able to work out, what is within just the remit of the day-to-day Democracy and Development Officer job, and what's actually needs to go to ASV. And I can't give you an answer. This issue has to be that, and this issue has to be that, because we have to see what issues come up. But I think you have to do it on a case-by-case basis.
Stephen?
Well, I'm going to be somewhat boring and agree with Jacob. Really, it has got to be a case-by-case sort of basis, but. I think we've learnt in this country with referendums, which ASV is to me very similar to referendum, has a habit of reducing complex arguments into the most simplest things, just to be on a debate where you have like a week or two before you decide. So I think you've got to be very, very careful what you put forward to ASV, and there's also got to be things that are achievable as well. It's pointless asking for free tuition fees because the university isn't going to do that. So you've got to be responsible with what you're going to be putting up there, for whether it's achievable and also whether, as Jacob said, people really care about it.
I want to bring in this comment quickly. We were talking obviously about the controversy that has erupted on many issues this year. CMP Movies has just commented on YouTube. Thanks very much for commenting. They've just asked, getting involved with SU democracy has been really toxic this year, with abusive comments and negative campaigning. What would you do as DDO to cool the tension? So, Stephen, I'll come to you first this time.
Well, obviously, abusive comments and negative campaigning, unfortunately, happens in the sort of real world of real politics, not national politics and Warwickshire County Council, etc., and that kind of level. And I think the student union has got better things actually than in place than local government has. But that said, you've got to talk to candidates, make it extra clear that there's already a warning system in place to sort of call it down. They've already introduced social events so that we can all talk together as candidates, so we don't see each other as the enemy. And I very much want to encourage consensual politics in the student union, and also with candidates as well, so that we have more things that unite us than divide us, and that's what we need to focus on.
Jacob?
I think this is a wider issue than just these current elections, and I think what we saw when there was that disagreement about POP, that certain SU officers decided to make a statement on behalf of a couple of them, criticising others for their conduct, which is incredibly unprofessional, and in any other line of work, we'd probably see them fired or disciplined. And I don't know what was actually done, but they're still in their jobs. I mean, and that causes a lot of the negative campaigning and the abusive comments you get on social media. So I think you cannot have certain sort of rogue people within the SU going off and making statements criticising others. You need to be a united front, and you lead from the front. If you have SU officers who are actively being toxic and criticising other officers online, then that's going to make everyone else do the same. So it's about setting an example, which I think some people within the SU have not done this year.
Do you think, just very quickly, if I can ask, sort of following on from, I guess, both your comments quickly, with regards to students getting involved in SU democracy, do you see this as a barrier for students being able to get involved? And how would you perhaps resolve this if it is a barrier? So, Jacob, come to you first this time.
Yeah, I think the main issue is that you tend to, and there's nothing, it's great that political and liberation society is involved in the SU and engage with it, but I think you get a thing where the second and third years within those societies, very much push it onto the freshers to get involved, and that's how it works. But I think if we look at academic societies and sport and sports clubs, they make up a massive group of students, probably more than any of the political ones do, and they're not really involved and engaged with the SU. And I think that's up to the officers to speak to those societies to actually let them know how they can actually engage with the SU and how the SU can work for them, how we can have things related to them go to ASV, rather than always just the political things. Because I think the political stuff puts people off as well. I think when you have too much of the political societies and the liberation societies getting involved, I think that just puts people off. So I think it's actually reaching out. The officers actually have to actively reach out. Just posting a few things on social media doesn't do anything. They actually have to have meetings with, and that's not just the job of the society's officer. That's the job of everyone. But they have to actively seek out to engage with these people.
And Stephen?
Well, I've always felt like mature students don't have posters up on Westwood campus. They don't have. I don't really feel like they think much of VASV votes and stuff. There's not really that engagement there. So that's what I really want to achieve, is to bring democracy to other campuses, so Gibbet Hill as well as Westwood. So we've got a wider range of opinions, which is always better in politics. And yeah, it needs to be on issues that people will be really affected day to day, rather than bigger things that we can't really affect. We can't affect everything with ASVs and things. So we need to talk to a wider range of people and get them more involved.
Let's move on now to another aspect of a democracy role. This comment here from Richard C. Thank you very much, Richard, for commenting. I want to ask, what is your position on slates, Stephen?
Well, I already know that Jacob has put down that he's anti-slates. But I haven't really formed a proper opinion either way. I can see that there's positives and negatives. And the difficulty is you need to see what the effects will be after a year or two, and tweak it first. And then if that doesn't work, then abolish them. I get the feeling that, talking to other officers, previous incumbents, they were saying that people were forming their own sort of almost slates to support each other. And I think that having proper slates brings it out into the open, and also makes it a more level playing field for people who are standing on their own, because I've got a bigger budget than someone standing on a slate. Whether it needs to be tweaked more, we'll have to see. Things are just too soon to say that we don't want them, or we do. And there's a sort of like a rule in politics where you don't undo the last incumbent's policy immediately. You've got to look at it and see whether it's working or not.
Jacob?
Well, I think we can look at the incumbents' policies and see that they're not working, considering only one group of students has decided to stand as a slate, and they don't even have a full slate across all the positions. And Stephen did mention the level playing field, and absolutely does not create a level playing field. It allows people who to not they don't have to run their own campaigns. They can get other people to run their own campaigns on behalf of them, other candidates, and you've got independent candidates who are trying to work really hard and struggling to get their voices heard as much. And I think it also makes it a bit more political as well when you have these slates, because it's very clear what sort of group the slate is from, and I think that actually contributes towards some of the sort of the negative aspects of the SU elections. I think it's much better if we have independent candidates, and obviously with the slates they get £15 less in expenses, but I don't think most people even spending their full allowance of expenses. I really don't think it's that significant, especially this year when it's just all online. What's it going towards? I don't think they create a level playing field, which is what these SU elections should be about.
Following on from slates, in terms of wider democratic structures, wider rules within the SU, is there anything in there that you would perhaps like to review for next year? Jacob, I'll start off with you.
I think we have to look at things like student council. One of my manifesto things is to get student council to be not just elected by the people on it, but by students. The whole student body. I think it's reforms like that which need to come in, because those are the type of things which are actually going to create a bit more democracy within the SU.
Okay, and Stephen?
Sorry, my cat was being distracting. She's been meowing at me. Yeah, well, as I said before, I want to widen the democratic appeal. So I want to get more democracy to Westwood campus, because kind of lost my train of thought. Can you repeat the question so I can answer it better?
Just in terms of what any wider SU democratic structures, are there any potential changes to those that you would consider making if you were DDO?
Yeah, I mean, autumn elections, I think, need some attention. I really don't think that much attention has been put onto the autumn elections. I know that they're part-time officers, but it doesn't feel like there's as much penetration. There's no interviews of candidates, at least when I stood for the last autumn elections. And also, if we are going to be relying more on social media, we need to allow candidates more time to establish a profile. And I think there needs to be a greater, greater analysis after the election to see where all the votes went, all the secondary votes and stuff, who got the money, so we can have a better debate about whether STV is working as well, which I've got confidence it is, but we don't know what exactly goes on with that. So
I would actually, can I just come in there, Cam? I would actually disagree with the fact that we need more time to have candidates better known, because I think if you suddenly allocate 2 or 3 weeks to run an election campaign, that's going to put so many people off who don't want to give up the time. So I actually think, and this year campaigning was allowed to start, 3, 4, 5 days earlier than usual, and I actually think that's a negative because especially for third years who tend to be the people running, or people in their final year, they don't necessarily have 2 or 3 weeks just to give up to go full on campaigning. So I actually think it should be a shorter window, and I actually think it doesn't create a level playing field, and it also means that people can just go into those slates, and some people don't have to do any work to actually become a known candidate. So I just wanted to interject on that point there.
Stephen, I've got to give you a very quick right to reply there.
I can see where you're coming from, but then and it just becomes down to money, how many people. What I don't want to happen is that I don't know many people on main campus, and what I don't want happening is that people who most people through societies and things are going to be able to instantly reach out for people that they know, and they're not going to have much competition with someone who hasn't got a presence online. I mean, I haven't really done much on Twitter, on Instagram. I don't really know how to use Instagram very well. I'm not a very photo-oriented person, and I feel like more time would allow better preparedness and a better campaign.
Thank you very much. We'll move on now to the second section of this debate. Of course, democracy is one half of the role, development is the other half of the role. So again, I'll lead in with the leading question, and then we'll move the debate on from there. So in terms of obviously the reopening of campus, and obviously SU finances form a big part of the development role. So can I ask you, how will you support the safe reopening of the SU's commercial outlets, especially if COVID restrictions remain in place at the start of next year? I'm going to start again with Jacob.
I think the main point is to do it exactly what's legally possible. I think we have to remember that most people at this university are quite young. They're not at much risk of related to coronavirus, especially when you're in your own bubble on campus. So I don't think there's any point in, if something is legally possible and able to do with the restrictions, I don't think there's any point in stopping us from doing it. People come to university to have fun, have a good time. Pop is my thing. I'm a proud attendee of 20 out of 20 pops in second year last year, and I kind of want to. I would like to have pop again. And it's such a massive part of the student experience, and so many of my best memories at university are in the terrace bar, in the dirty dark, in the copper rooms. And I feel really sorry for the first years who haven't been able to have that this year. So I really, really want next year's first years and next year's second years to actually be able to experience. Because for me, that's not what the academic side isn't really what university is about. It's the socialising and creating memories with all your friends.
And Stephen.
Well, it's difficult to find a point where Jacob and I disagree, really, because obviously, we want to reopen things safely, make sure that everyone's safe. 20-year-olds are low category of risk. So, I agree. We need to just follow government guidelines best we can. But we also need to encourage people back into the pub and things. So we will have to look at communicating the fact that it's safe, as well as just making it safe, and obviously just continue following the government guidelines. I think the government has been slow to put guidelines in place, so I might be a little bit ahead of government guidelines, just to make sure that we can keep things open as much as possible rather than going into full lockdowns.
Well, nothing's open right now, so there aren't any guidelines yet.
Well, not now, but just for, obviously after, I'm due to have my vaccinations by the end of June, I think. So hopefully with vaccinations, we'll all be able to open up things up more reliably. And we won't have lockdowns, but we just need to keep an eye on things for mutations, etc.
You obviously makes me interested. It's about the reopening of campus, and I guess you made a point there, Stephen, about people obviously communicating to students that it is safe to go back to these outlets. And one key thing these outlets provide for many students is part-time employment. And for many students, not just from SU commercial outlets, but indeed more generally, that they will have lost part-time employment as a result of the pandemic, and this will have contributed to increased living costs. So I guess firstly with regards to the commercial outlets, but perhaps more widely as well, how will you support students with getting things like part-time employment and helping them tackle high living costs? Stephen?
Well, I've been made aware that the EAT card may be being suspended, and obviously that's a good way for people to have saved 10% on their eating out, and also encouraging people to eat at uni. So I would definitely want that or a similar scheme to be reintroduced. And I was also thinking about seeing if we could get people who are having bursaries having extra discounts to encourage people on lower incomes. And be a better way, more targeted way of reducing costs. I also think that there's not enough budget options, particularly in routes and places. There's no sort of like value products and things. That would be another area. And I also think to encourage people back and having a good time, I think there needs to be more offers. And obviously with staff, there's a limit to you've got to have open vacancies advertised, so you've still got to recruit the best person you can for each role. I prefer to get people who live on campus and stuff, but obviously you've got to follow legal guidelines of hiring and firing.
Jacob?
So I think the university and the SU usually, in the past have done a really good job of advertising part-time roles for people, just one-off jobs. I know lots of my friends who just used the university website and got some really good jobs. All through their department, and once things open up again, hopefully that will continue. We really need to encourage it. I think there's a balancing act between making things more affordable, especially related to the SU's commercial outlets, because they can't just cut every price for everything, because the SU do need the money and they're in a difficult financial position. So I think there's a balancing act. Maybe the SU outlets can do their own, help out, eat out. Yeah, the Rishi Sunak thing. I've messed up. The eat out to help out. Yeah. But there's still a balancing act that we can't just they do still need to make a profit because they have been struggling financially.
Well, indeed, financial struggles I think have been well documented, not just obviously in the university, but more widely as well as a result of the pandemic. And I guess focusing, if we can go back to student living costs in general, because this has been an issue that has blighted students for many years. And with an SU, as you acknowledge, as you stated there, Jacob, may not be able to, or with an SU that is financially struggling itself, how would you as DDO support students with increasing living costs? So Jacob, I'll come to you first again.
Well, I think the fact that they're scrapping Warwick accommodation is very sad, and I think that did help out a lot of students. For example, with no deposit, having a no deposit system, whether that's in the power of the SU to actually bring back an item, I think the university have already made their decision on that. That may be a lost cause, but it's still something that the SU can definitely pursue. And I also think the university is not going to be in a strong financial position. They're not going to have tons of money to throw away. But if they can, we need to give people more in terms of the hardship funds, and grants for students who are struggling and won't be able to will find it a lot harder to get by in the next year.
Stephen.
Well, there's things like Too Good to Go. Universities signed up Too Good to Go before sort of lockdowns. I don't know if you're aware of it, but there's an app that allows you to allows us to save costs by wasting less food, but for students to be able to eat more cheaply by then buying that food at a discount. Also, to bring sustainability into it, obviously we can reduce living costs for students by encouraging eco-friendly products, reducing the amount of water usage, trying to make sure that there's insulation in homes and double glazing. So maybe try and get landlords on board to reduce, to live up to their sustainability sort of responsibility to try and reduce day-to-day costs. I mean, honestly, I don't know how on the money we get given every year, anyone can sort of really survive. It's really tough without having a part-time job or extra income, and then you're sacrificing your studies. So it's things like, say, just trying to get support students, but also do it in a sustainable way as well, so we can do two things at once. So reduce food waste and help out students with food and other costs.
It's good you mentioned sustainability, because I was just about to move on to that. Sustainability has become an increasing part of the development side of the DDO rule in recent years. So can I ask you, how will you work towards a more sustainable campus? And do you have any targets in mind for any sustainability measures? So Stephen, I'll start off with you.
So I don't know if you know this, but I live on a boat, or I did for the majority of student life. So I've got from March to about October, weather dependent, I'm fully sustainable with power from the solar panels I have on the boat. I've also connected my hot water system to my log burner. I know log burners aren't especially green, but they're what I've got. So I've made that heat up my water. And it's those kind of things that I'll be getting the university to look at to produce more of its own power, to recycle energy where possible. Just reduced university's costs, creates income for the university, and is much more sustainable and greener. So I think it's a win-win.
Okay, and Jacob.
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't have the same green lived experience to the extent that Stephen has. But I think a lot of this is working with the environment ethics officer. Clearly that's their remit slightly more, and they have a lot more expertise than I necessarily would if I with all the other roles that are going on. I think there's also places we can start, and I think online learning and online campaigning has taught us a lot of lessons that maybe you don't need. You can send emails and advertise things online rather than putting lots of posters up. And I think the usual context in which the SU elections are usually held with so much paper wastage, with all the leaflets that go out, all the posters that go around campus, I think maybe we could stick to the online stuff a bit more. And I think that's already a big step.
One big part of the recent discussion on climate and sustainability has been the idea of a carbon neutral campus. Is this something you both like to move towards? And do you have a target for when you would like to see this achieved? So Jacob, I'll start off with you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going off what a lot of the presidential candidates all said. They'd like a carbon neutral campus by 2025, and I fully support that. Maybe that's not attainable, but I think sometimes we should sort of go towards those aims which aren't necessarily attainable, because you'll still get pretty close to that. So I definitely support that, and I think that's something students, nearly all students will support. And by 2025, if we can, if not, within the next 5 years after that.
And Stephen?
Well, in setting targets is one thing, but meeting them is another. So it's all about finding ways to get there rather than focusing on making a target. For instance, there's not enough car sharing going on campus. So there is a car sharing scheme where there's a one bay in each car park, but that needs to be expanded to really encourage people to car share. More electric charging points needs to be sort of planned ahead. There's lots of work to be done on campus to improve and encourage the use of electric vehicles, electric buses, etc. That all help. So rather than setting targets, it's about finding ways that we can every year cut down and get closer and closer to net zero.
One last question. As Democracy and Development Officer, you'll sit with the Student Union President on the University Council. With regards to your relationship or how you perceive the university's relationship with the Students' Union being, how would you like for that to be? How will you approach discussions with the university? Stephen, I'll ask you first.
Well, particularly now, we need to work with the university. We can't be at loggerheads with them. We can't be fighting them on every single thing. So we need to get the best outcome for students, whilst also making sure that the university is financially stable, and the student union financially stable as well. And then working with the president, it's all about consensual politics for me. So if we disagree, then I'll make my case in private, and then I will support them in public.
And Jacob.
I think it's all about transparency in terms of what the university do. I think there's lots of times where they do lots of good, but they don't necessarily advertise it and push it as much. And then there's a few times where things go a bit wrong, like the group chat, the rape group chat scandal, and that didn't look very good for them. So I think it's actually we need to work with the university. As Stephen said, it's in our interest to work with the university and for people to have a positive view of both of them. So I think the SU can help the university in terms of actually communicating a lot of its wins a bit better. I think people sometimes sort of think that the university is just there to entertain the ideas of students, and I think we need to remember it is a business and it's trying to promote itself, and so I think students sometimes need to take that into account and appreciate that a bit better. But I certainly think the university could do a much better job at actually communicating what it does and what it achieves to us for students. And while it is a business, don't always push that kind of view and try and be a bit more paternalistic towards how they view the students.
Well, thank you very much, Jacob, Stephen. It's been fantastic to have you today. I just have one last question for you. Obviously, we've been talking about your policies, what you want to do as DDO, but I want to get to know you a bit more as people now. So just one last question. What is your ideal Warwick night out? If you obviously run the commercial outlets as part of your role as DDO, what's your sort of ideal night out? So Jacob, I'll ask you first.
Perfect. So for me, it's always start at the terrace bar, on campus after you just finished your, lectures or whatever. Probably two or three drinks there. It used to be Carlsberg in first year, but now probably Carling on bus stop. And then the bus into Leamington. Probably go to Spoons first. Get some cheapish food and a couple of pints. And then probably Old Library as you're making your way south in Leamington. Definitely then a visit to Kelsey's, and definitely having a big eliminator. And then if I'm still awake and active, then Neon probably.
And what about yourself, Stephen?
Nowadays, obviously, I keep things a bit more low key. So just be dog and duck, maybe a real ale or a real cider or something. Just chat with mates. But earlier on in my life, I liked having a dinner, film, and then pub or club. We used to like some quite heavy music and stuff. So that's the kind of thing that I'd like to bring to campus more. And I know that there's a cinema club, so I'd probably go to there first, and then I'd go to the Dog and Duck, and then maybe the coffee rooms afterwards.
You're just making me miss the halcyon days of being able to have nights out like this. It's slightly saddening, but thanks very much to both Jacob and Stephen for coming on today. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Right.
So as you saw there, Jacob and Stephen, the two candidates for Democracy and Development Officer for the SU elections. All you need to do to vote for one of them is to go onto the Warwick SU website, as is floating at the bottom of the screen, warwicksu.com/vote, to cast your vote for the Democracy and Development Officers, and indeed for all of the other positions in this year's SU elections. As we said earlier, we have other hustings taking place throughout the week here at Raw. Tomorrow, I will be back at the same time tomorrow talking to the candidates for Sports Officer, and our station manager, Lucy Ferraby-Stocks, will be here at 3 o'clock tomorrow. She'll be talking to the candidates for Education Officer. As well as that, as we said, the interviews with the presidential candidates will be coming out very shortly at 2 o'clock. So stay tuned to them, where we talk one-on-one with the candidates to get to know a bit more about their policies. Also, once you have voted, please cast your vote in our Raw exit poll. That is attached to the description for this video. So tell us how you voted, and then once the voting has closed, we will publish based on the predictions we have who we see is going to win when we do the big decision. Yes, big decision is back as always this Friday at a slightly later time of 9 p.m, where Raw will be taking you through the results of this year's spring elections, and also getting a chance to interview the winning candidates and see how they're feeling and what they plan to do when they get elected. Well, thank you very much for watching these hustings. It's been a pleasure to have you watching us. Hope you tune into the rest of our coverage throughout the spring elections. But I've been Cam Hall. Thank you very much.